The Ten of Pentacles is a card of...
Hold on, we're doing something extra this week.
Why? I haven't done anything.
You're not in detention. I'm not telling you to write lines on a blackboard.
So what are we doing then?
We're looking for the magic in the everyday world around us.
Where?
Well, you have to look for it, don't you?
Right.
I'm just going to sit quietly with my thoughts. I keep thinking it's Tuesday. Yeah, that was a good one.
Look, why are we doing this?
Throughout this suit, you've been talking about how we need to see the magic in the world around us. So get on with it.
But I don't know where to look.
The miracle of creation is in all things. Why have you got a toilet brush in the lounge?
Never ye mind. That's why. Anyway, I can't see anything magical in here.
Well, go outside and have a look round then. So, what did you see? We saw someone watering the plants. Oh, how wonderful.
What he means is there was a gentleman going to the toilet behind a tree.
I found a magic wand.
That's not a magic wand, it's a stick.
Sticks are nature's magic wands.
No, they aren't. I'm throwing it away.
Oh, yeah? Then what happens if something needs to be dislodged?
Dislodged? Where from?
That fella outside looked constipated to me.
What, you offering to go and coax it out for him?
Look, for goodness sake, just forget it.
Welcome to my video on what I consider to be the most important minor arcana card in the whole tarot. The Ten of Pentacles is a card of accomplishment, abundance, family, and above all else, coming home. In the key to the tarot, A.E.WAITE says a man and woman beneath an archway which gives entrance to a house and domain. They're accompanied by a child who looks curiously at two dogs accosting an ancient personage seated in the foreground. The child's hand is on one of them. So home is obviously an important theme in this card, and living the domestic life. We see a busy street with people seeming to be living ordinary lives, but there's a lot of magical symbols overlaid on the scene. The most obvious being the 10 Pentacles laid out in the position of the Sephiroth on the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. We've also got an old man sitting quietly on the left and being ignored by everyone except the two dogs in front of him. Rachel Pollack likens this man to the legendary king Odysseus, who spent 20 years in the wild and returned to Ithaca disguised as a beggar. Only his faithful dog Argos recognised him. I think the idea of a king hiding in plain sight is the perfect metaphor for this card. The old man's cloak is covered with magic symbols, and next to him, leaning against the archway, is a magic wand. Not the kind made from living wood that we find in the suit of wands, more like the one that's held aloft by the magician back at number 1 in the trumps. I think the combination of magic and the ordinary world is one of the defining characteristics of this card. The child's hand on one of the dogs while the grown-ups busy themselves points to how we're much more open to things when we're younger. Above the old man's head we can see a set of scales, a symbol of justice but also a symbol of balance. I think the perfect balance of the other elements is what makes this card possible. Rachel Pollack says one of the most symbolic and deeply layered minor cards. The 10 shows us the very image of the gate, opening to hidden experience in ordinary things. We can draw some comparisons to the World card back at number 21 in the trumps, in the sense that we get this idea of completion and success, but also because it combines all the elements together to create the physical world. It's the culmination of the Pentacle Pip cards, and therefore the culmination of all the different suits. This card ties all the minor arcana together into a single concept. It represents the miracle of creation, manifested so completely that it's just become normal life. If we take a look around, everything we see is the 10 of Pentacles, to the point where the magic has become ordinary. If we compare it to the 10 of Cups, we can see the people on that card are staring in wonder at the miracle of creation, while on the 10 of Pentacles, people are just going about their day-to-day business, blissfully unaware of the magic that surrounds them. That magic lies not only in the material world itself, but also our awareness of it. The very fact that we are conscious beings having an experience in the universe. I'm going to get a little bit metaphysical here, so bear with me, but there's a theory called panpsychism, which suggests that consciousness is a fundamental aspect of reality, just like gravity or time. In this sense, consciousness is the magic. We've got no idea what it is, but without it, there's nothing. The reason we don't see it as magic is because we're surrounded by it every waking moment of our lives. It's just there and we haven't got the foggiest idea why. The universe just seems to grow into these living things and observes itself through them, through billions of different points of view. I think our time in the wild is when we're completely lost in the idea that we're all separate from each other, but coming home is the realization that we're all just different expressions of the same thing. Rachel Pollack goes on to say, all these hidden signs and wonders point to the basic theme of the Pentacles. The everyday world contains a magic greater than any of us can usually see. The magic is all around us, in nature, in the very fact that life exists, and that this vast universe does not fly apart. The Thoth card has changed from discs to coins, and just like the Waite Smith card, it has them all laid out in the positions of the Sephiroth on the Tree of Life. This is the same setup we see on the cups and the swords, but not the wands for some reason. Aleister Crowley says the discs, or as they have now become coins, are arranged on the Tree of Life, but the 10th coin is much larger than the rest. The image indicates the futility of material gain. So there's quite a few different facets to this card. On the surface we've obviously got money, as we can see by the fact that we've moved from discs to coins. In this regard he's making the point about how accumulating wealth for its own sake is futile. He talks about how acquired wealth will dissipate unless it's put to further use. It's not what you've got, it's what you do with it that matters. Although Crowley did blow his family's entire fortune, so that might be worth bearing in mind. Also, if we look closely at the coins, we can see many symbols that all relate to Mercury in one form or another. These range from the alchemical symbol to the Hebrew word for Raphael, who's the ruling angel of Mercury. This is important because not only is Mercury the corresponding planet, but also the Roman god Mercury is the equivalent of the Greek god Hermes, and of course the Egyptian god Thoth, which is where the deck gets its name from. So Mercury is clearly all the rave on this card, with the exception of the symbol on Hod, which just happens to be the Sephira of Mercury. On that one we see a hexagram. Crowley goes on to say it is the holy hexagram, the symbol of the uniting of the microcosm and the macrocosm, the accomplishment of the great work, the summum bonum, true wisdom and perfect happiness, sic sit vobis. Anyway, there's an enormous amount of depth to this card that goes way beyond the scope of this video, but in understanding Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot, L'Homme Duquette makes sense of it all and lists all of the symbols on the coins. If you don't own this book, why don't you own this book? Link in the description. And while we're on the subject, Lon talks about how the card is ultimately about the cycle of regeneration. He says the 10 of discs represents the climax of the descent of matter and is the signal for the reintegration by the spirit.
The Sforza Marseille cards have achieved the absolute pinnacle in flowery and coiny designs. I can't quite believe I've managed to keep this section going until the end, but here we are. The Solar Busker card sees the return of a cherub. Looks like he's taken up the drums and he's packing his symbols away into a box behind a dog who appears to be having a shit. The progression of the species is above all complete, as indicated by the perfection of the number 10, to which it amounts.
Good.
The Hermetic title for the 10 of Pentacles is Lord of Wealth.
Cash, dosh, wonga. That's certainly good news for me and for sweet CCNZ in Hawaii.
Let's not forget that it's also about the wealth of our relationships and our meaningful experiences.
Yeah, blah blah. Look, we've been through the whole true wealth lies not in the accumulation of possessions stuff, and I get it. Hoarding wealth like the fella on the 4 of Pentacles is no good for anyone, including him. But you can't help the poor by joining them. Let's not forget that if you want to do good things in the world, then it tends to be a whole lot easier if you've got some gold in your trousers. If you haven't got it, you can't give it. However, the card obviously amounts to more than that. The Thoth card is simply called wealth, so we're getting wealthy across the board here. Obviously we can see that with all the coins everywhere, but Pixie has shown us another aspect of wealth. On the Waite Smith image, we can see the very picture of the kind of security we get from a loving home and having somewhere to go back to. Amelia Earhart once said, the more one does and sees and feels, the more one is able to do, and the more genuine may be one's appreciation of fundamental things like home and love and understanding companionship.
The 10 of Pentacles corresponds to the Virgo zodiac sign and to the planet Mercury.
So it's Mercury in Virgo this time, and I think we can see that as clear as a bell on the Waite Smith card. Stability is a big part of this coupling, and that's exactly what we've got on Pixie's image of coming home. That stability comes from the fact that Virgo is ruled by Mercury, and they're both very similar in terms of practicality, communication and intelligence. Together they build a stable foundation, which is the perfect place to build a home and raise a family. Ten of Pentacles notable people include crime novelist Agatha Christie, children's author Roald Dahl, and We Are Family singer Joni Sledge.
The Ten of Pentacles resides in the world of Asiya and sits at the 10th Sephira of Malkut, at the very bottom of the Pillar of Mildness.
We're back at Malkut at the bottom of the tree, and as we're also in the physical realm of Asiya, that makes this the earthiest place in all of creation. As Olivia Newton-John once sang, let's get physical. The important thing to remember about Malkut is that it isn't separate from the divine, but it acts as a vessel for it. It's the point where all that divinity that's cascading down from Keter comes together to be manifested into everything we can see, hear and touch. Lomas says it's Malkut bulging at the bottom, as if the forces and energies of all the tarot cards, all the Sephiroth and paths, all the Kabbalistic worlds have settled into it, like the tired sediment of the entire universe.
The Ten of Pentacles herb is wild yam. The Mexican wild yam is the plant that led to the development of the birth control pill that's still used today.
If the stork is the bird of birth, then what's the bird of birth control? The swallow?
But what does it all mean?
The Ten of Pentacles is the culmination of all things, crystallized into the material world. However, I appreciate that description doesn't really help much when we're just doing a reading to see whether we should invest more money in turd coin. So for now, let's focus on the practical. Waite says gain, riches, family matters, archives, extraction, the abode of a family. So home and family are the main messages of this card, also financial abundance and how that creates a stable environment for ourselves and our loved ones. Rachel Pollock says on the surface the card represents the established home, the good life, a secure and comfortable position in the world. The card can also indicate taking things for granted, and we can look at that on a micro and a macro level. In terms of the universe, it brings home the idea that the culmination of all the elements results in something so perfect and stable that it becomes mundane. I touched on this earlier, but it's easy to ignore the significance of the universe because it's just there. Of course, the physical world is just the earthly reflection of the spiritual world, so we can obviously relate this concept to our day-to-day lives. Sometimes we don't appreciate the good things around us. That could be a partner or a career or anything that we might miss if it was gone. Counting your blessings can be a meaning for this one. Rachel Pollock says the people concerned, however, appear to take the comfort for granted. They find the security boring or stifling.
It makes it known the presence of a treasure in the house.
That'll be me. Yeah, that sounds about right. If we turn the Ten of Pentacles upside down, it can mean the whole complacency idea turning to reckless behaviour. Waite says reversed, chance, fatality, loss, robbery, games of hazard, sometimes gift, dowry, pension. So there's a whole bunch of completely unrelated things, but let's focus on the risk aspect. If we get to the point where we're completely failing to appreciate the value of anything, then we might start chasing excitement by doing risky things. That could be anything from gambling away your money to getting into another relationship where your common sense is screaming at you to stay away. Rachel Pollock says if the sense of boredom with life increases, it can lead to taking risks, especially financial or emotional ones.
It announces a great receiving of money.
Oh, here we go again. I'm still waiting for this grand fortune to come along. The big takeaway from the Ten of Pentacles is the idea of coming home to a place of abundance and security. Now, some people have asked me why I decided to do this card last, and it's because I can see God there.
Oh dear, I think he's finally lost the plot.
Are you alright? Yes, bear with me. I talked earlier about how I think of consciousness and our ability to experience the universe as being the real magic, but we don't appreciate it because it's just there all the time. When we pull all the way back behind our joy and pain and ego and memories and desires, all we're left with is the witness, that part of ourselves that just observes without any judgment, the universe experiencing itself. That, to me, is God. And that's what I think the old man on the Ten of Pentacles represents. God, hiding in plain sight. And that's why I wanted to finish with this card.
Whatever floats your boat.
So there it is. 3 years ago I made a promise to myself that I would make a video about every tarot card in the deck, and I can't quite believe it, but here I am recording the final one. It's certainly been an interesting time, ranging from the absolutely fantastic to the downright miserable, but I can say that it's never been boring. Definitely the biggest highlight was when I got a comment from Milo Duquette on the Queen of Cups video, saying that he and his wife Constance were both fans. I don't think I've ever been more excited by anything in my whole life. We're talking about my favourite author. I was starstruck. Things did get a little rough for me around the time I was getting to the end of the Suit of Wands. Those videos were getting shorter and shorter every week because I was just struggling to keep up, and I felt like I was going nowhere. Ironically, that all culminated when I made the video for the 10, which is all about burdens and oppression. I've said all the way through that I felt like I was living through the cards, and I almost gave up around that time. Luckily, things picked up when I got to the court cards. The Page of Wands with his infectious enthusiasm got me back on track. Not long after, I made the decision to keep going, but to upload every 2 weeks instead of every week, and that's helped me to stay consistent and finally make it to the end of the tarot deck. However, this is only the beginning of Kippy's quest. My reasons for starting with the tarot are that it's probably the most comprehensive study of ritual magic that there is. Most of the teachings are there in one form or another. Examining the cards has taught me about archetypes, the elements, the Kabbalah, astrology, Hermeticism, Christian and Jewish mysticism, and all kinds of things about religion and philosophy. It's also taught me more about myself than I think I've learnt in the rest of my life combined. But there's a lot more to learn about ritual magic, so the quest continues. This year I'll be moving on to the Zodiac, the planets, and I'm going to be starting a deep dive on the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. None of this is to say that I'm finished with the tarot. I've got some videos on spreads and reading coming up, and I also want to come back to make some content specifically talking about Waite and Pixie and Crowley and so on. Plus the Fool also needs to finish his journey through the rest of the minor arcana, so that'll keep us both busy. What do you think? There's no way everybody was kung fu fighting. I just want to say a great big thank you to all the people who volunteered their time and effort freely to help me on the project. Lisa with the Hermetic titles, Tallula with the Zodiac, Jess with the Tree of Life, and Ange with the Herbal Correspondences. Ange actually wrote that section herself, and she's got her own Instagram that's all about flowers, plants and growing, so check that out. I'll put a link in the description. Finally, I want to say a huge thank you to you guys for watching, liking, commenting, and just being the best subscribers that anyone could ever hope for. I'm constantly humbled by the amount of love and support you give to the channel. I never could have imagined that combining the occult with toilet humour and slapstick would resonate with so many people, but here we are, the best community in the world. I'm going to leave you with 2 quotes this time. The first is from Lady Frida Harris and comes from a letter that she wrote to Aleister Crowley when she'd finished painting the Thoth Tarot. She said, "How I should like to do them all again." When I look back at some of my videos, I know exactly what she means. The other quote is from T.S. Eliot, and it's one that I used when I made the video for the World card back at number 21 in the Trumps, but I think it works really well with this card, and the end of the tarot in general. He said, "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started, and know the place for the first time." We've made it back home! It's time to put the kettle on and have a nice cup of tea. May the coming days bring you contentment and peace. Until next time!